Godfather is a perfect movie. But how do you follow a perfect movie with a sequel that is just as perfect? A sequel the director didn't even think was makeable.
Time came for there to be a second Godfather. They wanted a second Godfather. I thought it was an absurd idea. The Godfather was complete.
I did a video recently on The Empire Strikes Back and why most sequels usually suck. It's because the main character has gone through their arc in the first movie. Their story is over, so any second installment usually ends up being a cheap imitation of the first one where their character has no more room to grow. So why did Godfather Part 2 work so well? Michael Corleone had already gone through his character arc from a college boy war hero who wanted nothing to do with the family business to the Machiavellian head of a criminal enterprise. Well, they did it by making it a dark reflection of the original with deep psychological insight. It's both a sequel and a prequel. But is it an equal? Let's dive in. At the end of the first movie, Michael was a cold-blooded killer who had tarnished his soul, but he still had his family intact. He still had a chance for redemption. Godfather Part 2 would see him lose every last remnant of decency, lose his soul, lose his family, lose everything he held dear because of his insatiable need for revenge. All because he lost sight of his father's core trait, that he did everything for his family. It juxtaposes Michael's story with that of Vito as a young man, as well as with the events of the first movie. Let's start with Vito's origin, the prequel aspect of the film. The story starts at his father's funeral. His father died at the hands of a mafia don, and his brother is murdered at the funeral for vowing revenge. Then he sees his own mother murdered and flees the country. Now you could compare this to Moses being saved as a baby, or just to show that I didn't waste my time as an English major, to Oedipus being spared his life as a baby and then coming back to become a king and seek revenge on the guy who plotted his death. Plus some other really gross stuff.
Give to Oedipus! Hey, Josephus! Hey, motherfucker!
Vito goes to America, where they change his last name to Corleone.
Vito Andolini from Corleone.
Corleone. Vito Corleone.
Remember what I said in the last video about The Godfather, of the writer trick of showing transformation in a character with a physical change to his appearance, like breaking Michael's jaw? Well, changing a character's name works pretty well too, except in Vito's case, they named him after the hometown where all the trauma happened, which symbolizes that he's never going to get away from this. He begins his life in the new world by going through quarantine, symbolic of cleansing himself of the old world. And staring at the Statue of Liberty through a barred window is some pretty tasty symbolism. He gets an honest job, but loses it because Finucci forces his boss to hire his nephew. Vito realizes he'll never get ahead honestly. He starts doing petty crimes with Clemenza and Tessio, but Finucci wants to wet his beak. Finucci is everything Vito in the original Godfather is not. He's a parasite on the community. He doesn't protect his fellow Italians, he robs from them. He is no one's friend, he is no pillar of the community. They just fear him. Vito tells the others he could get Finucci to take less, and if he could deliver on this, they would owe him a favor. This would cement his role as leader, if he could pull it off. When Finucci does agree to take less, Vito realizes he's a poser who doesn't have the muscle behind him that he pretends to. Vito kills him, ridding the community of a parasite. The first thing he does after the murder is go back to his family. And the little American flags are a nice touch. Vito becomes an early version of the Godfather, but unlike Finucci, he helps people. He sees himself as the champion of the underdog. But just to remind the audience that Vito Corleone isn't Robin Hood, we see him go to Sicily and seek revenge on Don Ciccio. He could have just had him killed, but he did it himself. Now, let's focus on Michael. Michael's story opens with his son's first communion, which echoes Connie's wedding from the original. But this ceremony is de-Italianized. The Tarantella becomes Pop Goes the Weasel. And nobody is tossing gabagool sandwiches. The meetings Michael holds in the back room echo his father's favors from the original. But no favors are given here. Senator Geary insults his family, and Michael justifies his corruption the same way he justified his father's when he realized a police sergeant was working for his enemy.
Senator, we're both part of the same hypocrisy. But never think it applies to my family.
Remember, Vito once dreamed of Michael becoming a senator, which Michael dismissed as another peasant avante. And now, Michael has a senator threaten him, and he deals with him with the old catch him in bed with a dead hooker trick. Classic. Now, they could have used that to destroy him. Instead, they used it to own him, which Michael sees as much better. Connie asks for money so she could get married. Michael refuses right in front of the man she wants to marry. Keep in mind, Michael had her husband murdered. He meets with Frank Pentangeli, and yes, the character of Frank Pentangeli was supposed to be Clemenza, but the actor who played Clemenza not only wanted a huge raise, he wanted his girlfriend to be allowed to rewrite the script. Producers love that. So they did a find and replace and changed Clemenza to Frankie Five Angels. Frankie Pentangeli wants Michael's support against Hyman Roth. Michael refuses because he has bigger deals in place with Roth. And while Vito may be long gone, his specter lingers throughout Michael's storyline.
Your father did business with Hyman Roth. Your father respected Hyman Roth. But your father never trusted Hyman Roth.
It means we should all live happily for 100 years. The family. It would be true if my father were alive.
Then someone attempts to assassinate Michael. He meets with both Hyman Roth and Frank Pentangeli, but figures out quickly that Roth is the one behind it. The Risottos try to kill Pentangeli, but Pentangeli now thinks that Michael was behind it, causing him to flip on Michael.
Michael Corleone says hello.
You might recognize that hitman as actor Danny Aiello, who went on to much bigger things after this. Someone in the 70s jokingly referred to the Godfather movies as mafia, major advancement for Italian actors. But my one question, why does he say Michael Corleone says hello? And this may be a hot take, but I consider this one of the few flaws in the movie. Now, they intended to kill Frank, but the cop happened to show up at just the right time. So the internet theory that they wanted Frank to survive, but to think Michael had turned on him, it just doesn't hold water. Now, does he say that just to make Frank think that Michael turned on him so his last moments on Earth are that much more unpleasant? I don't know, but I think he says it because the filmmakers wanted him to say it to give you a reason that Frank was flipping on Michael. So yeah, I don't love this line. During the meeting with Roth, they cut the cake, symbolizing their plans to divide the spoils of Cuba between them. Something even his father never achieved. And once again, the ghost of his father is always there.
You all know Michael Corleone, and we all remember his father. We were running molasses out of Havana when you were a baby. The trucks owned by your father.
While in Cuba, Michael discovers that it was Fredo who is the traitor. Michael has his enforcer kill Johnny Ola. And by the way, Johnny Ola is played by Dominic Chianese, who's the same actor who played Junior Soprano on The Sopranos. I was about 3 seasons into The Sopranos when I realized that. Then, Michael sends him to kill Roth in the hospital, but fails. Now, sending someone to the hospital to kill a man. Where have we seen this before?
You know my father. Men are coming here to kill him. You understand?
So now, Michael is echoing the men who tried to kill his father. He gives Fredo the kiss of death, his own brother.
I know it was you, Fredo. You broke my heart.
Michael sees Fredo's betrayal as the ultimate betrayal. And let's not forget, this was foreshadowed in the first movie.
Fredo, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again. Ever.
So he comes home, finds out his wife had a miscarriage, and has to ask Tom Hagen what he got his son as a gift. And remember what Vito once said.
Because a man that doesn't spend time with his family can never be a real man.
Then the scene with his mother. And it just goes to show, it doesn't matter what a tough guy you are, the real you comes out when you're alone with your mom. Michael is afraid he's losing his family, something unimaginable to both his mother and to Vito. Michael says the times are changing, which is true. I mean, divorce was becoming more prevalent than it would have been in his parents' generation, and it would have been more prevalent for white Anglo-Saxon Protestants than for Italian Roman Catholic. But that's also a bit of a deflection on Michael's part. Blaming it on the times takes a lot of the blame off himself. Kay has figured out that he's a murderer, and he promised to make the company legitimate years ago and still hasn't. So that might have something to do with her wanting to get away. But sure, Mikey, blame modern society. At the Senate hearings, which, by the way, were modeled on the Valachi hearings, Frankie Pentangeli's testimony would surely have put Michael away. But Michael outsmarts him. Not because of his college education or clever lawyer tricks or anything he picked up in the military. It was the ancient Sicilian tradition of omerta. By flying in Frankie Pentangeli's brother, Michael reminded him of the ancient blood oath he had taken, the code of silence. Some people interpret Michael flying in the brother as a threat, saying, rat on me and I'll kill your family, but that's not what this is. This is about omerta, the code of silence. There's even stories of mobsters in Italian jails literally stapling their lips shut as a way to saying, I'll never talk. Michael wins the hearing, but then Kay tells him she's leaving and taking the children. He's losing his family. And then he finds out the miscarriage was really an abortion. If he thought Fredo committed the ultimate betrayal, this shows him he underestimated what betrayal could be. And these are all things Vito wouldn't have even imagined could happen to him. Michael plots to kill Hyman Roth and gets pushback from Tom.
Just consider this, Michael, that's all. Just consider it. Now, Roth and the Rosados are on the run. Are they worth it? And are they strong enough? Is it worth it? I mean, you've won. You want to wipe everybody out?
I don't feel I have to wipe everybody out, Tom. Just my enemies.
This echoes how Tom had argued with Sonny.
Sonny, we ought to hear what they have to say.
No more. Not this time, Consigliere. No more meetings, no more discussions, no more Salazzo tricks. You give him one message, I want Salazzo. If not, it's all out war. We go to the
Some of the other families won't sit still.
They hand me Salazzo.
Your father would want to hear this. This is business, not personal. Things are starting to loosen up a little bit. If you go after Tattaglia, all hell's gonna break loose. Let the smoke clear. Pop can negotiate.
No, Pop can't do nothing till he's better. I'm gonna decide what's gonna be
all right, but your war's costing us a lot of money. Nothing's coming in. We can't do business.
Well, neither can they. Don't
They
worry
don't
about
have
it.
our
Please
overhead.
don't worry about
We
it.
can't afford a stalemate.
Well, then there ain't no more stalemate. I'm gonna end it by killing that old bastard. I'm gonna
Yeah, you're getting
kill
a
it.
great reputation. I hope you're enjoying
Well,
it.
you just do what I tell you to do. God damn it, if I had a wartime consigliere of Sicilian, I wouldn't be in a shape.
And remember, Vito once said that Sonny wasn't a good Don. So Michael is doing things that Vito never would have done. This is business, not personal, and he's taking it very personally. Connie begs him to reconcile with Fredo. He has the chance to bring the 3 surviving siblings together, but he refuses. He shuts the door on Kay, and this is a much darker echo of the original, where one of his henchmen closes the door, shutting her out of the criminal aspects of his life. Now he's personally shutting the mother of his children out of his life completely. The montage of murders that call back the original have a much darker tone. In the original, he was consolidating power, and yes, seeking revenge, but here he murders Hyman Roth, a man thought to only have months to live, which, granted, is debatable.
He's been dying of the same heart attack for 20 years.
He gets Frankie Pentangeli to commit suicide, even though he had already refuted his testimony and would have spent the rest of his life in prison. He was no longer a threat. And Fredo, there was no tactical reason to kill Fredo. He was no longer a threat. He chose vengeance over his own blood, his own family. He waited until their mother was dead to do it, but that's a pretty small consolation. Whenever I watch this movie, it's around this point where I start to think, maybe this is even better than the original. There's something about that shot of the leaves blowing across the lawn and the music kicking in. Then the flashback comes, and it reminds me just how great the original was, and I start to waver. During the flashback scene, we see the moment that Michael tells his family he's joined the Marines to fight for his country, despite the plans his father had for him.
They're saps because they risk their lives for strangers.
Oh, that's Pop talking.
You're goddamn right, that's Pop talk.
They risk their lives for their country.
Your country ain't your blood, you remember that.
I don't feel that way.
I don't feel that way. Well, if you don't feel like that, why don't you just quit college and go to join the army?
I did. I enlisted in the Marines.
Brando was supposed to reprise his role as Vito, but he didn't. Some say it's because of the incident at the Academy Awards where he sent Sacheen Littlefeather to accept his award. Whether it was Paramount's decision or his decision, we'll never know. But suffice it to say, they had Sonny say the lines that Vito was meant to. So the line, "That's Pop talking," was literal in this case. This was Michael's moment to break away from the family, to be his own man. And as I talked about in the last video, you can't outrun your destiny, no matter how hard you try. The scene ends with him sitting alone as an outsider of a family he saw as corrupt, about to start life anew. It's full of sadness and alienation, but also full of hope and promise. The promise of fulfilling his own destiny. The black sheep, ready to live his life on his own terms. It did not go as planned. It fades to Michael sitting alone as a man who has become worse than everything he had once imagined his father to be. He's lost one sibling, driven away another, and murdered the third. He drove away his wife, which jeopardized his relationship with his children. Compare that to Vito, who died playing with his grandchild. Michael lost whatever shred of hope he had left. He lost any illusion that his destiny was his to choose. And that, my friends, is how you end a freaking movie. And you may notice Michael's still wearing his wedding ring. But I ask you, is he thinking about Kay or Apollonia? And which Godfather movie is better? It's really hard to say, but if Luca Brasi put a gun to my head, I'd have to go with Part 1. But if you say Part 2, I could still be your friend. And here's a sad fact. Mario Puzo had written a script for Godfather Part 4 that would have covered Vito Corleone's life from the events of the prequel parts of 2 right up to the events of the original. It would have shown Vito consolidating power and Sonny coming of age. Robert De Niro wanted to reprise his role as Vito, Coppola wanted to direct, and they couldn't get it made. Yeah, this is how Hollywood works. So I have a group of writer friends, and whenever we realize how stupid this business is, we turn to one another and one of us does our best Hyman Roth and says, "This is the business we've chosen." It happened a lot during the Writers Guild strikes. Well, what are you gonna do? Anyway, check out my novel Falling into Shadow coming soon. There's no mafia per se, but there are corrupt oligarchs and family struggles for power. In the meantime, here's the video for Empire Strikes Back I mentioned earlier, and here's the video on Godfather Part 1 if you haven't seen it yet. I'm not going to do a deep dive into Godfather Part 3, but I touched on why it sucked a little bit in this video about Book of Boba Fett and Obi-Wan Kenobi using the Will Ferrell, Christopher Walken sketch More Cowbell. I promise it makes sense.